but what you do need to do is be able to actually follow the news, understand what is propaganda and what isn't, and just like don't fall into the traps, which is what Vaush has done by listening to people like, again, Patrick Hillsman, Francesca Fiorentini, Ben Burgess, Dylan Burns, all these people. They do have nefarious reasons for pushing the talking points that they push onto Breadtubers.
Jackson Hinkle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for being on. It's an honor to speak to the man who defeated Vaush recently in that epic debate. And I want to go over that debate a bit today and kind of just walk through it. I thought it was an amazing performance on your part. But before we get into that, you've really made a name for yourself recently on YouTube and found a pretty robust following. Could you maybe just go into your own personal history a little bit, and how did you start getting involved in politics and being a content creator?
Yeah, so I've only had my YouTube since like February of 2020 during the start of COVID. So, and I only started live streaming in like November. But I've been involved in politics since I was probably about 15 or 16. I got really into environmental activism during that time, and I'm 21 now. So when I was like 15 or 16 in high school, you can't just be a surfer your whole life. You need to do something. You need to contribute to society in some way. So I started an environmental organization in my high school that spread to a bunch of different chapters throughout the globe, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. We had a bunch of successes. Like, we got plastic water bottles out of the school or the campuses of like 65 schools in our school district. We played a major role in getting solar panels on 8 different high schools in our school district. And I realized that there was like only a certain amount of work you could accomplish just by being like an organization, as being a grassroots like activist. And that's what inspired me to get like more involved in politics and actually like, getting involved in electoral politics. And I decided that I was going to run for city council in the town I live in, San Clemente, California. I've lived here my whole life, and there's a bunch of really big issues that we're facing here. And one of those is nuclear waste storage. We have a massive nuclear power plant here called San Onofre, and it's the largest de facto like dump for nuclear waste in the nation. So through all these local issues, I got really involved in a bunch of national politics, as well as running for city council. I came up short in that race. I got second place in my second run for city council, but it was close. And after that, I was on Nancy Pelosi's Youth Advisory Council doing like environmental work there. So I've been in the belly of the beast, and after kind of like going through all of that, and other ventures as well, I decided that I wanted to kind of like use the knowledge that I had built and continue learning, right? Because this is a continued process of learning for me. I've changed in a lot of my political views from when I started my channel in February of 2020 to now. And it's been cool to be able to kind of live through that journey on YouTube, build a community in the process, and now, get involved in these debates with people like Vaush.
So again, it seems like you really built a pretty large following in a very short period of time. So just a year and a half, and I believe you have like 20,000 YouTube subscribers, right? Thereabouts.
Yeah.
So how did that happen so quickly? Was there like certain people that you had on as guests, or just how did you create such a huge following so quickly?
A lot of it's guests. Yeah. Like doing collaboration work is really big. Jimmy Dore coming on was big. My like second interview or first interview I did ever was with Tulsi Gabbard when she was still running for president. So that was really cool. And then a lot of it was just, oddly enough, has nothing to do with politics or collaborations. It's just figuring out YouTube SEO, search engine optimization. And it's something that I feel like a lot of like YouTubers are like really good with and use it to their advantage. But when you look at a lot of like political people, they don't, and they don't know how to use it to their advantage, which I guess is like the advantage of being a younger person who has background in working in some of this stuff. Like I've done marketing for a few companies where I had to learn this stuff, learning like YouTube SEO and Instagram SEO, all that sort of stuff. So using that to my advantage, like definitely helped catapult me faster along this path than most other YouTubers, I guess. But no, I think all of that combined, as well as just pumping out a bunch of content. Like one of the first YouTubers I started watching was Kyle Kalinske, and his advice to people who wanted to start YouTube channels of their own was always like, or really any work of their own in which it revolved around like having a big like online audience, was if you continue pumping out content and you just don't go away, then people are going to have to listen to you at some point. And I feel like that resonated with me. And all throughout COVID, I was doing like just pre-recorded videos, and I was doing like 3-4 videos a day, which to be able to do that. But now with live streaming, to be able to just like live stream for 3 hours and cut up some clips, it's so much easier. But yeah, just all of that combined, lots of work, learning SEO, and then having on good guests, and I would say making good content as well.
So you mentioned that your political philosophy has changed a little bit. Could you describe what that journey has been like over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so especially when I started the channel, I was focused kind of on pointing out the flaws and inconsistencies in the arguments of like social right wingers. That's what I enjoyed talking about, and it was funny to poke fun at people like Caitlin Bennett or Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, all those sorts of folks. But I don't know. Like it's just after a while, it's like, okay, anyone, literally anyone can make fun of these people. This is not high level thinking, and it gets really, really redundant at some point. You know, it's like they say the same things over and over. You reply with the same things over and over. It is what it is. It doesn't really feel like it's also something that you can change people's minds on. Like people are kind of set in their ways as far as social issues go. But I started really getting into, I guess, when I started watching Jimmy Dore a lot more, I started to understand that there needed to be a change in mindset of a lot of progressives and leftists as far as how we look at the squad and the Justice Democrats. And I got really involved with Force the Vote and organizing around that. And through that, I felt like I had an increased passion to address the inconsistencies in the arguments of the Justice Democrats. And also through watching people who do really solid foreign policy analysis, like Richard Medhurst, I've tried to use the platform I've built to educate my fellow Westerners about what's going on around the world and how it's being funded by the U.S. taxpayer dollar. And I honestly, like, that's what I have the most fun covering is foreign policy stuff, just because I feel like a lot of people don't cover it. It's very like niche, and it's a niche genre of politics. Like you have to really be dedicated to the genre itself, like foreign policy, to be able to follow it closely enough to understand like all the different key players and what's happening. And I'm not saying like I'm an expert, but I do feel like I put in a lot of work surrounding it and try to absorb as much information as possible. And yeah, I think it's just so interesting to cover, and it's something that is oftentimes mischaracterized and covered in like really terrible ways by not just the mainstream media, but also, as you know, these like pseudo socialist YouTubers like Vaush or Destiny or any of the Breadtubers or the Young Turks for that matter. So it's something that just doesn't get a lot of honest commentary online on YouTube.
Have you experienced any kind of censorship or demonetization?
Yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, I've never had, fortunately, like knock on wood, I've never had my whole account demonetized or anything like that, which is something that I feel like most of my colleagues have had happen at some point or another, you know, full demonetization or like removal of the YouTube partner status. I've had like almost every live stream I do gets demonetized, so, or partially monetized,
Mm.
which means you're not making any money on it. And then I would say so, like, yeah, every live stream I do gets demonetized. Maybe like 1 in 20 doesn't get demonetized. And then as far as the clips I post, I'd say it's about 30% of them get demonetized. And maybe like 50% get demonetized right when I post them. And then I'll do like the manual review process and it'll get like overturned. But it's such a big issue. And the censorship in general, like of like stuffing us down in the algorithm, that's something that we all face, because the YouTube CEO, Susan Wojcicki or whatever her name is, she's even admitted to the fact that YouTube has a tiered system as far as news media. So they prop up mainstream news sources in the YouTube algorithm and they suppress people like us. So that's something that we all face regardless of, you know, the content that we're doing. But fortunately, I've never had my whole like account demonetized or anything like that.
And I believe that you are on Rockfin, right?
I am.
Are you on any other platforms?
Yeah, so I'm on Odyssey as well. And I also stream to Twitch, which I know is not like an outsider, like renegade sort of like platform, but Twitch there. I mean, there's just such a huge audience on Twitch that I feel like most of the internet doesn't even know about. It's kind of like a secluded section of the internet, and it's free of any of the real anti-imperialist leftists, unfortunately. But that's why I think it's such an incredible opportunity to start trying to build out in anti-imperialist voices on Twitch. And there's already a few people who are doing that, like Haas from Infrared. He's building up an incredible audience on Twitch and winning over a lot of those Breadtubers from rank imperialists like Vaush. So I think that's going to kind of be my focus moving forward in the interim, at least, to try and, I mean, if we're talking about winning over people to the anti-imperialist left and you know, increasing our voices, I feel like we've done a solid job on YouTube of doing that. I feel like over the last year, through Force the Vote, through all of this TYT and Jimmy Dore feud, I feel like a lot of people have kind of woken up to the fact that the Young Turks is not honest news. It's not an honest analysis, especially of foreign policy or privacy issues or anything like that. Julian Assange, they're liars, and I feel like we've won the message on YouTube. Unfortunately, there's a huge audience on Twitch that I think can still be won over. So I think that's important.
Yeah, so I thought the timing of your debate with Vaush was interesting, and you know, kind of played into this dynamic that we were seeing in this feud between TYT with you know, the folks at the Gray Zone and Jimmy Dore. And I believe that you're the one who extended the invitation to Vaush to debate, correct?
Yes. So yeah, on his channel, and he was talking about the OPCW cover-up scandal, and he talked about it for like 40 minutes, and the segment was just filled with like lies and misinformation throughout the entire thing. And what happened was I did a segment on my channel reacting to what he said, and someone posted it, and then someone on Twitter was like, responded to Vaush and was like, debate Jackson Hinkle about the OPCW. And I responded, I'm like, he won't. And then to my surprise, he did respond and he said, no, look, I'll debate you. Like, I don't care. I debate everyone. So I took him up on that offer. He initially was trying to, you know, say that he didn't want to debate the OPCW cover up. He's like, well, there's plenty of other things we could debate. Why don't you want to, why do you just want to talk about the OPCW cover up? And I'm like, because you did a full segment on this. So of course I want to talk about what you just spent 40 minutes talking about so confidently. Right. But yeah, it was hilarious. And this was, so I had done like one debate in the past with another streamer named Kevin Logan, but it was technically a debate, but it really wasn't. Like, he was just kind of asking me questions about Force the Vote and like challenging questions about Force the Vote. I don't really consider that even a debate. So this was like my first, second, whatever debate, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I'm in no way like a debate bro. Like that's not really what I want to do. And I consider anyone who's like a debate bro, debate lord, to be someone who just like will do what Vaush does and debate anyone and everyone on any given subject, even if he doesn't know a lot about the subject. But I do think debates can be a useful mechanism, again, to not only like further solidifying the arguments that you have on a given subject, but winning over people who might be on the other side of the aisle, or following the person you're debating. So,
And when you were reaching out to Vaush to set up this debate, was there ever any discussion about having a moderator?
yeah. So I messaged him and I said, "Yo, like, I think we should probably get a moderator because we were in the DMs and we were like chatting it up, and he was already in the DMs from the get-go. Again, he was trying to change the conversation away from doing a debate around the OPCW cover-up. He's like, yeah, there's plenty of other things we could talk about. Let's not, like, why do you want to talk about that so much? And I was like, again, because confident about doing a segment on it. So why do you now feel like you don't want to talk about it, Vaush? So that was ridiculous. And then in the DMs, he was labeling me as an Assadist, which I'm not.
But how did he even work that in there? Like he's
He-
just talking privately, like, and you're an Assadist, so
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of going back and forth about like what we were gonna debate. And I'm like, bro, like you literally felt so confident talking about this. Why don't you want to talk about this? This is the largest pro-war deception since WMD in Iraq. And he was saying stuff like, oh, I hear that talking point a lot. Like I hear it from a lot of Assadists like yourself, blah, blah, blah. So he was very disingenuous. And we went back and forth for a while. Like, and it was on the 4th of July when we were doing this. So I was pretty fucked up, and I was still DMing him about all this. I was like partying with my sister and some of our friends down in San Diego. And I'm like managing to like send him messages talking about the OPCW. It was hilarious. So, anyways, so after all that, I was like, okay, what's beyond clear to me is we'll probably need a moderator because this DM discussion did not go well. We'll probably need a moderator. And he was like, I don't think we'll need a moderator. I think we can play nice. Okay. As long as you think we can play nice. And then what does he say in the first second of the debate? He labels me as, he's like, oh, you have a lot of arguments like neo-Nazis. Oh,
well,
what happened to playing nice?
So what he said was, and again, this took me aback, is he said that he thought that the debate might be fruitless because he has a lot of experience debating Holocaust deniers.
Yeah.
And then he went on from there to mention how he was doing last minute research, and then also made a comparison to Alex Jones and his conspiracy theories about Sandy Hook.
All right, so a little bit of a preamble before we get into this. I suspect this is probably going to be a waste of time because I have a lot of experience debating Holocaust deniers. I know that generally speaking, when people form their opinions based on conspiracism, it's usually not because they actually have a vested interest in the facts. It's usually because they have like a set of biases that existed beforehand, and they'll engage in like selective reasoning to adopt any beliefs that they can use to post hoc justify those, pre-existing biases. I guess we'll see how much of a waste of time this turns out to be. So I wasn't that familiar with the specifics on this incident until I guess last night.
I saw you're doing some late night Wikipedia prepping, right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with like every conspiracy theory out there. I also don't know much about like Alex Jones' claims about Sandy Hook. Sometimes you got to like pack that stuff in. It's also like completely irrelevant to anything a progressive should care about. So
I was a little bit too hopeful going into the debate that maybe we'd be able to come to some, common understanding at the end of the conversation. I didn't think we were going to agree on like the overarching arguments that I was making. But I thought that there would at least be agreement upon the fact that there should be a scientific advisory board review of both sides of the arguments, right? Weigh out all the evidence that's been put forward and come to a conclusion based on the evidence that's been put forward by both, aisles of the argument surrounding the OPCW cover-up. He didn't even do that. And like I said, yeah, I was pretty taken aback when he initially said those things. He labeled the stream title debating an Assad defender. That was the title of his stream. So I just I couldn't even believe it, because I'm an Assad defender here. I've been very clear about my views about Bashar al-Assad. And I tried to make that clear at the start of the debate. I said, look, like, I'm not an Assad defender. I'll be very clear about my views about Assad. And also, I'm here to defend the integrity of the OPCW and the investigators who are on the ground in Syria. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking about this. That's the evidence that I brought forward here today. I could go through this entire debate without saying Assad's name, but he couldn't, because he wanted to label me as an Assad defender, and that was his whole tactic. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed that he took that route, and I was maybe a bit too hopeful that there could be some sort of common ground that was found by the end of the conversation. But I guess now, upon having that full interaction and looking at previous interactions Vaush has had with people who are, like me, anti-imperialists, I kind of understand who he is and what he does and what his shtick is. And I do think I was too hopeful. I think I was too hopeful.
One another interesting thing that happened during the debate was Vaush, I guess, exposed his DMs where he was getting some advice about the OPCW scandal. Could you explain what he showed on his screen?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. You talk about the timing of this debate. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm almost through reading Caleb Maupin's new book, Breadtube Serves Imperialism, and Vaush is kind of like the de facto like leader, largest voice of Breadtube, which is this subsect of political commentators that he associates with. And in the book, one of the principal arguments that Caleb Maupin makes is that people like Vaush have certain voices that are advising them on key issues that they don't know a lot about, right? And those voices have nefarious reasons for espousing the arguments that they make. One of those is, Patrick Hillsman, the world-renowned Brooklyn-based Young Turks brought on to try and debunk Ermete. Everyone knows how much of a fool Patrick Hillsman is. I mean, he made the most ridiculous arguments that were so easy to debunk. He was just lying about what took place in Syria. So Patrick Hillsman was DMing Vaush before this debate, as well as Francesca Fiorentini, who also is a Young Turks so-called specialist on the Middle East and Syria. And Vaush was streaming the night before our debate. And during the stream, which I don't think he thought I was going to be watching, because again, he was streaming till like 3 a.m. prepping for this debate. He spent like 4 hours reading Wikipedia and Bellingcat, trying to consolidate his arguments the night before we were supposed to talk. And while he was doing that, he went on Twitter. And when he went on Twitter, his DMs, his direct messages, they just automatically opened when he opened up the tab on Twitter. And then he was like, "Oh, God damn it." And he closed the tab. It's the funniest video ever. But before he closed it, you could see direct messages from Patrick Hillsman and Francesca Fiorentini, who were coaching him prior to this debate. And those two were coaching him, as well as Dylan Burns, who's another, so-called foreign policy expert. I think it's clear he hasn't even followed anything that's gone on in Syria since like 2016, but that's neither here nor there. What it shows is that Vaush really doesn't know anything about what's happening in Syria, if that wasn't already clear, by relying on other people who have really, really, really shit takes to coach him on what he's supposed to be saying, because he doesn't have his own opinions on all of this.
I'm just wondering, because I haven't read Caleb's book yet, does he discuss any other kind of these bigger influencers who are having an impact on what Breadtube is saying?
Yeah, so he talks about I would say most of the big Breadtubers. So the way he breaks it up in his book, and it's really great. I just did a conversation with him yesterday about the book. The way he breaks it up is he briefly talks about some of the bigger, creators, like Breadtube content creators, at the start of the book. But throughout the entire book, most of what he talks about are the key arguments that they typically make. So He talks about the fact that bread tubers really don't understand the difference between Marxism and capitalism, and they can't actually define Marxism, like what Marxism is. They talk about how, Caleb writes about how a lot of bread tubers don't really know what fascism is, and they mislabel what fascism really is quite often, as we again saw in my debate, calling me in my arguments adjacent to neo-Nazis and what they put forward. And he did a really great job of like breaking down a lot of the common tropes you hear from bread tubers and why they're wrong. And hopefully there are members of the BreadTube audience that read this book and wake up to the fact that these people don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it's not to say that you need like a certain degree of education or background in politics to have a show or anything like that. I completely disagree with that, because I'm a perfect example of someone who like didn't even go to college, but I'm talking about foreign policy and debating it with people. But what you do need
it's probably to your benefit that you didn't go to college, because you'd be indoctrinated to say the opposite.
Maybe, yeah. But what you do need to do is be able to actually follow the news, understand what is propaganda and what isn't, and just like don't fall into the traps, which is what Vaush has done by listening to people like, again, Patrick Hillsman, Francesca Fiorentini, Ben Burgess, Dylan Burns, all these people. They do have nefarious reasons for pushing the talking points that they push onto bread tubers.
Well, what I think is going to happen at this point, just because the rift between the imperialist progressives and the anti-imperialist left has been exposed so much, it seems as though these two factions are kind of congealing. And actually, Cenk Uygur just recently, when he was announcing that Kyle Kulinski was no longer involved with TYT, he was responding to, in part, a question about having Vaush on. And I think that we're seeing that a bit more. The Gravel teens, who ran Mike Gravel's campaign, they also have a connection to Emil Vigeland. And they also have a connection to Howie Hawkins, who was pushing some anti-Assad, pro-Russiagate type talking points. So to me, it does seem as though these two sides really are congealing, and around TYT, you're going to see more similarities in opinion between what the stuff that they're saying and the stuff that Breadtube is saying.
Where the Young Turks, they don't even posture as trying to be like socialists or Marxists or anything like that. That's kind of what differentiates the Young Turks, in my eyes at least, from a lot of breadtubers. Is breadtubers act like they're something that they're not, whereas the Young Turks, they call themselves the homo progressives, but like that's the furthest left that they'll label themselves,
Mm-hmm.
So the Breadtube audience thinks that like what Vaush is Marxism. Like that is the pinnacle of Marxism and Marxist analysis that they can find on the internet, which is so off the mark. It's so off the mark. And so maybe we'll see that happen, like this kind of convening of all these of these imperialist voices. I don't know, but what I will say is definitely a lot of these Gravel teen kids, they have already they have already meshed with the Vaush side of the spectrum. Like Dylan Burns, who I mentioned a few times already, who's very close friends with Vaush, advised him before my debate, coached him before my debate on the OPCW cover up. Dylan Burns is a streamer, but he was also one of the Gravel teen kids. So he literally helped run the Gravel campaign in some form or another. I think he was like a state director in Maryland, but obviously he has really, really terrible takes surrounding Syria, but also he doesn't even support the boycott, divest, sanction movement in Palestine. So it's like, how do you call yourself an anti-imperialist, but you don't even support like the basic tenets of like strategy and movements to support anti-imperialist ideology? And I'm sure there's more I could dive into, but again, I don't dedicate too much time to these characters because they're so ridiculous. But I do remember there was a time when like I thought I might debate Dylan, so I was listening to a little bit about what he had to say on his political background, and I was just like, No way. He just openly said he calls himself an anti-imperialist, but he doesn't support BDS. Like, what is this? So it's so ridiculous, and they've really unmasked themselves in a series of ways. And I think slowly but surely, more and more people are going to be waking up to that. The response to my debate was incredible. I had so many people reach out to me and saying stuff like, "Look, I went in this debate expecting you to get destroyed, and you proved me wrong. And I was a Vaush fan, and now I've kind of woken up to a lot of the lies that I commonly see him putting forward."
Just going back to the Gravel teens, I don't know if you saw any of my reporting a couple of years ago, but I kind of proved repeatedly by having Mike Gravel on my show that his campaign was misrepresenting him over and over again, from hiding his endorsement of Tulsi Gabbard when he was actually endorsing both Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, or either one for the presidency. They hid the Tulsi Gabbard endorsement, and I was the one who had to bring that to the light.
I still want to maintain my presence in the race by endorsing Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. So I'll continue in that capacity. I believe that both campaigns will use me as a surrogate as time goes on here. So I'm very committed to them, and there's nothing unusual about supporting two candidates when there's two offices open. One is for president, the other is vice president.
So when you say that you are endorsing both Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, are you supporting one for president and one for vice president, or are you supporting either one to be president or vice president?
Either one. In other words, let's see what happens in the polls, and let's see what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire, and clearly the field will narrow down, and we'll see how Tulsi and Bernie play out as the field narrows.
Additionally, there was a letter that went out asking people to donate to Howie Hawkins' campaign before he was the Green Party nominee. That letter went out in Mike Gravel's name. I spoke with Mike Gravel. He didn't know who Howie Hawkins was at the time. Something else I wanted to ask you about today was Howie Hawkins. Are you endorsing him?
No, I don't know much about him, and so I haven't endorsed anybody else in that regard.
Do you know who Howie Hawkins is?
Well, he sent me some emails, but I haven't read them. I've just been so busy with so many emails that I get. So, to my knowledge, no, I haven't endorsed him, and I don't know what he represents in that regard.
Okay, because there was an email that went out from your campaign, or addressed from your campaign, that was asking people to donate to the Howie Hawkins campaign. Did you know about that email?
No, I didn't. And you have to understand that my campaign was run by teenagers, and on a couple of occasions they can endorse who they want as individuals, but they don't necessarily bind me on any endorsements in that regard. In showing that Mike Gravel, because there was a misconception for a while that Mike Gravel was actually writing his tweets, that he was like the person tweeting on his Twitter account. I read Mike Gravel a tweet about troops leaving Syria where it's appeared as though he was quite upset about it. But in speaking with Mike Gravel, he was fully in support of that. It was completely the opposite. And so I agree totally to pull the American troops out. It is not a loss of support of Kurds. The Kurds participated in the war in that area because of their own self-interest. We should have never been there to begin with. This is a regional problem that should be addressed by the regional players. We are not a regional player in that part of the world.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on this quote. This quote says, "There is no higher disgrace to America than the abandonment of the Kurds, fighters for freedom and independence, to the hard right forces of Erdogan. Every American should hang their head in shame." What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think we should hang our head in shame. I think we should hold our head high and bring home the American troops who have no business being there, period.
Do you know who said that quote?
Pardon me?
Do you know who said that quote?
No, who?
That was your Twitter account.
My Twitter account. Okay, well that this goes to prove that that sometimes the kids that run my or ran my campaign don't always have the same views that I have or haven't listened to me.
So, I revealed over and over and over again that these teens were misrepresenting what this great anti-imperialist voice was saying. And, now it's unfortunate that Senator Gravel is no longer with us and we can't really ask him about these things, but there's an institute in his name, which also, by the way, I also revealed that Mike Gravel was not really fond of having an institute, but he kind of got convinced into doing it, essentially.
I think my only concern is, of course, they came up with the idea of having an institute. I'm not enamored of that. The question becomes who's going to run the institute. And they assumed that it would be easy to find another couple guys to do what they're doing. And I've shared with them that that's not easy at all. The uniqueness of what they've done, I don't think is particularly replicable.
It's unfortunate that there's this institute out there who's putting out this, these tweets, which may or may not align with what he believed in his name. And there's also things that, he was very passionate about that I don't think they're going to talk about. For instance, Mike Gravel was very outspoken about having a second 9/11 commission. He talked about it quite frequently. The Gravel Institute will never, ever talk about that ever. So that's just one unfortunate thing that I see is this this misrepresentation of facts from that side.
Yes, I agree with all of that, and I'm gonna have to go back and watch some of those videos because that was probably before I was as in tune with, like, the political YouTube sphere as I am now. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. Again, I have listened to some of these kids talk when they were involved in the Gravel campaign, and they don't support BDS. They were pissed when Trump was removing troops from Syria, but they are. They continue to, Vaush and Dylan, they continue to leverage this claim that Trump removed all the troops from Syria, and this was such a bad thing. They don't even know that we still have over 900 troops in the northeast of Syria. In addition to that, Trump was trying to remove the troops from Syria, and then his special envoy to Syria, James Jeffries, this horrendous neocon figure, he convinced Trump to negotiate upward of leaving 250 troops in Syria. But then when Trump was in the final days of his presidency in the lame duck session, James Jeffries came out, did an interview with Defense One, and told them in the interview that, yeah, we told them we were going to keep 250 troops there, but actually we have way more than that. And the LA Times reported there's over 900 troops there. We have natural gas firms that are over there that are based in Delaware, like Delaware LLCs that are in Syria, stealing Syrian oil and natural gas. We have multiple bases in the northeast of Syria that we've named after U.S. oil companies like Conoco. It's ridiculous. So that's what I'm saying when, like, they actually don't follow this news. They don't follow foreign policy stuff because they continue to say, oh my God, this is so terrible. Trump removed all the troops and, the Kurds get squashed again. They get brutalized again, which is, I mean, like, yes, the Kurds have gotten, screwed over so many times throughout history. But they didn't remove the troops. Like, the troops are still there. They have quite a few troops there. So it's just, yes, I agree. It's disappointing to see them take the Gravel name and weaponize it to serve their imperialist ideology. They're usually, by and large, like, pretty decent, like the Gravel Institute, from what I've seen on domestic issues. But even sometimes, like, one of the videos they put out was Emma Vigeland. They had Emma Vigeland on one of their videos talking about how there's, like, no rich history of socialism in the United States, like of proletariat action in the United States, which is just such an erasure of history, right? There's so much working class history and organizing in the United States, and all you have to do is, like, read one book to learn that. You could literally go read, like, the People's History of the United States and learn that most of what Emma Vigeland insinuated in that incorrect. There is a longstanding history of working class solidarity and organizing in the United States, and she just erased all of it. And again, you have to question, why is she doing that? Why is she leaving out all of this relevant history? It's the same reason that our teachers in grade school don't teach us about this history, because if people start learning about this, then they'll recognize that there is the capacity for change. They can organize. There is the possibility that they could have a better standard of living, and they can actually mobilize people on the ground to fight for progressive policies like Medicare for all.
So going back to your debate with Vaush, what do you think was the biggest mistake that Vaush made during the debate?
I think the biggest mistake that Vaush made was not preparing. I mean, it was very clear he didn't know what he was talking about. He on multiple occasions just stated demonstrable falsehoods, and I was able to catch him in those statements and point out that he was lying about what he was alleging, and it threw him off his game. He would get flustered. He would just ramp up his aggression whenever I would catch him saying something that was incorrect, and he made himself look like a fool. I think a lot of people are focusing on the fact that like he was just like deranged and calling me all of these like names. The reason why he was doing that, I think by and large, was because I was catching him in these false statements he was making, exposing him. And then he really didn't have anything to say. He would kind of stumble around his words for a few seconds, and then he would say, well, you're just, all you conspiracy theorists are the same. You just say, whatever. He would say his little smear and let me respond. But it's like, if he had been better prepared, he wouldn't have made those mistakes. He wouldn't have said those demonstrable falsehoods, and he wouldn't have made himself look like such a fool. And also, he just like, he didn't, in my opinion, he didn't even put forward some of the better arguments that I've heard that require a more complex understanding of the issue at hand to debunk. He was kind of putting forward like surface level accusations and claims that could be easily debunked. Like, for example, he was saying Ian Henderson, one of the inspectors, wasn't on the ground in Duma, which he was. Like, we have all the evidence in the world to back up the fact that he was on the ground. Just went to show that he was not prepared. He didn't do his research. And as we talked about a few minutes ago, the research he did do was a 4-hour stream the night before our debate, reading on Wikipedia and Bellingcat, which is Bellingcat's funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. And they serve their imperialist agenda. And he was using those sources to prepare the night before the debate. So he really didn't know what he was talking about. In addition to that,
he was streaming that, or he admitted that during a stream?
No, he was streaming it. You can go back and watch.
Why would you stream that?
So he was streaming that because, and this is my opinion, like, I don't really know why he was streaming it, but he was having people send him links, and he was asking questions to his chat about some of the things that he was reading and testing out some of the arguments, like, on his chat. He was like, well, if this is the case, then that means that blah, blah, blah. And he would see how his chat would respond. So he was doing that the whole night, but I watched it all. Literally, I stayed up pretty late that night prepping for the debate, just writing out each thing he was going to say and preparing with my notes so I could easily debunk the things he was going to say. But the most insane part was 3 days before our debate, he did a stream in which he alleged that my principal, he was laughing on his stream and said this debate was going to be embarrassing for me because he thought it was so funny that he thought my principal claim was that there was a chlorine gas attack rather than a sarin gas attack. And that was the argument I was making, was that Assad could not have been responsible because I believe there's a chlorine gas attack rather than a sarin gas attack.
Why did he think that was your argument?
I have no idea. Whoa, someone sent that in chat. Someone was like, it's so funny. They just think there was a chlorine gas attack rather than a sarin gas attack, and that rules out that Assad could have done this. And he read that out, and he was like, yeah, these people are ridiculous. Obviously, that's still a chemical gas attack. This debate's going to be so embarrassing. And obviously, that's not what any of us are alleging. We allege that there was no chemical weapons attack, you know? So he really didn't know what he was talking about.
There was also another claim that he made regarding if Ian Henderson said that a chemical attack did or did not happen.
Oh, we'll get to Ian Henderson. Don't you worry, buddy.
There was no evidence to suffice that the helicopters definitively dropped those alleged chemical cylinders into the buildings. And that's your principal claim. That's what I want to talk about.
Are you referring to Ian Henderson right now?
Yes.
Ian Henderson was never there.
That is a false claim. What are you talking about?
I'm mixing them up. Wait, hold on 1 second. Where's that report from the OPCW?
That is
I
a
could be
false
mixing them
claim.
up with Alex. Hold on.
But
wait, hold on. With respect to Investigator A,
did you really just say that Ian Henderson wasn't there? Did you really just say that? You really just said that Ian Henderson wasn't on the ground in Duma? He was literally, Vaush, he was literally taking measurements in the building. We were talking about one of the inspectors, Ian Henderson, who, keep in mind, is like one of the two most senior officials of the fact-finding mission team that was on the ground in Syria. So when the fact-finding mission team did their original report, they basically had arrived at the conclusion that it was unlikely that helicopters could have dropped those cylinders on locations 2 and 4. Where allegedly these chemical attacks took place. And they said, you know, it appears as though this could not have happened, but we want there to be like another take a closer look at this issue. Who was tasked with looking into that? Ian Henderson. He was not in that report looking into whether or not there was a chemical weapons attack. He was looking into whether or not helicopters could have dropped those cylinders on the locations, or if not, whether it could have been manual placement of the cylinders. So his report wasn't even looking at whether or not there was a chemical weapons attack. But Vaush in the debate said, well, Ian Henderson found that there was a chemical weapons attack. He was just looking into whether or not it was manual placement or these fell from a helicopter, which is just patently false. And no place in the engineering report or in any report that they did does it say that, yes, there was a chemical weapons attack or anything like that. But obviously it's not going to be, even if there was that in any of the reports that were done by the original fact-finding mission team, it wasn't going to be in the investigation that was looking into how the canisters were actually placed there. Okay. So he said that. And I was honestly shocked because I was like, am I just tripping, or like, am I missing something? Like this didn't happen. And you kind of probably saw it took me like a minute for this to set in how absurd it was. But that's how he debates. He just says these crazy things.
So you do realize Ian Henderson did conclude that there was a chemical weapons attack, or at least that was where he believed the evidence led. You're the one making the claim that there was no chemical weapons attack, but in doing so, you're citing evidence from an engineering report from a person whose conclusion aligned with mine, that there was a chemical weapons attack.
Where's your evidence that Ian Henderson claimed there was a chemical attack?
Have you read his report?
I'm asking you for the information.
Sure. I mean, we can go and read the report if you want.
Well, you're stating it like it's fact, so I figured you'd have it in front of you.
That was his conclusion, yes.
So where did you get that?
From his report.
That there was a chemical weapons attack.
He said that the evidence led in that direction. Yeah. He was under the impression not that there wasn't a chlorine gas attack, but rather that it was placed there.
Wait. No, he did not say that. He did not say that. Vaush, you're making this stuff up. So again, please, one more time, just so I don't get it wrong here. What did you say? What did you say?
His claim was not that there was no chemical attack, only that the canisters were planted there rather than dropped. His contention was with the deployment of the canisters.
So wait, so you know, because a few seconds ago you said that he said that there was a chemical attack, but that it wasn't carried out by helicopters.
I'm trying to be like specific with my language, and it keeps not working because you keep not hearing. Okay, I'm going to be as specific as I can with this language.
Is the echo about to start coming in again, Vaush? You said that Ian Henderson claimed that there was a chemical attack. That's what you said.
So I'm pretty sure what I said was that the report was principally on the method of the canister's delivery.
No, you said he said that there was a chemical attack.
As presented in it did not indicate that Henderson was contesting the existence of a chemical weapons attack.
No,
That's the
you
most
said that.
specific language I can
No,
use.
Vaush, you're changing your words now. Now you're saying that he didn't contest that there wasn't a chemical attack. A few seconds ago, you said that Ian Henderson did believe there was a chemical attack, but that it was not helicopters who carried out the attack, and that it was likely manually placed. So you're changing your words here. But what I will say is that he did believe that it was likely a manual placement. You're lying about him saying that there was a chemical attack. And if you're not, if you believe you're not lying, I'd like you to cite this, but you can't because you're lying. I don't know how to like reason with someone like that when he's just making stuff up. And I said, Vaush, if you really believe he said that, find it in the report and show me, prove me wrong. And he's like, well, blah, blah, blah. He tried to obfuscate to something else. And I'm like, no, Vaush, the burden of proof is on you. You just claimed that Ian Henderson, one of the senior, officials of this entire inspection team, said there was a chemical weapons attack. That's a very big claim. So tell me. And he couldn't tell me. And then he sputtered off with more of these smears. And again, it was very easy to catch him in these false statements. And I think that's what led to the eventual rage quit.
So it seemed as though the only real point that he was trying to make around that time of the debate was regarding why would Assad be shelling but not doing a chemical weapons attack, and trying to, I guess, do a gotcha there. So essentially saying, if Assad was willing to shell the city, why would he not conduct a chemical weapons attack?
Again, with this, there was like multiple things that were, it made it hard to keep up with what he was saying. First of all, he said there was, he was talking about the claim that witnesses had seen 2 Russian helicopters drop items. He didn't specifically say cylinders. He said drop items on location sites 2 and 4, which again is where these cylinders were. That, and he said that would insinuate that essentially these were responsible for the alleged chemical weapons attack. First of all, there was only one witness who claimed to have seen these 2 Russian helicopters. Vaush said there was dozens. From everything I've seen, from all the reports I've read, and from the journalists like Aaron Mate, who I've talked to after this debate, I'm like, where did he make up that claim that there were dozens of witnesses who saw these helicopters? And everyone's just like, I don't know. Like, I think that was another claim he just made up. So what we do know is there was one witness who claimed to have seen 2 helicopters. They did not claim to have seen those helicopters drop anything, let alone on locations 2 and 4 where these cylinders were found. Okay. So that's the first thing that was hilarious about the claim. The second thing was that, yes, he continued to try and just get me in a gotcha and basically say like, well, Jackson, like, if there were helicopters there, well, you'll admit there's helicopters there, then what do you think that means? Because the helicopters were there around the time this alleged chemical attack took place. So I didn't even want to get into that, because obviously that has nothing to do with the fact that these cylinders were manually placed there, according to the information we have so far. And he was trying to essentially tie pieces of this story together that cannot be tied together based on the circumstantial evidence we have from the investigators who are on the ground. So, he kept trying to get me in this gotcha, saying like, well, do you concede that there were helicopters there? And I was essentially like, I don't know. I don't know, Vaush. You don't know either. There's only one witness who claims to have seen this. And there were so many inconsistencies of the witness reports that were on the ground in Syria. Again, because this town was ruled with an iron fist by this extremist Saudi-backed group named Jaish al-Islam, who committed atrocities against the people of Douma and would force them into saying certain things that they wanted them to say. And this has been well documented by Intercept reporters, by BBC reporters, by people like Robert Fisk, legendary journalists. They all will acknowledge the fact that the witness reports you have to be careful with, because You have this terroristic militia who is forcing people, even some of the doctors, into towing a certain line, promoting a certain narrative that serves their agenda. So there was clear inconsistencies in what Vaush was alleging. We honestly, we don't know if there were helicopters there. There was shelling going on, but the premise that this means that the helicopters would have committed a chemical attack is delusional, because if Duma meant for Syria at that point in time, you would know that this was an incredible opportunity. This was like one of the biggest victories in the dirty war that Assad was on the verge of claiming, right? Duma, this region of Syria, which is highly populated. It's a dense area. It's highly populated. It had been overtaken since like 2013-ish, like late 2012, 2013. So it had been ruled by Jaish al-Islam for a significant portion of time. It was this large holdout that was still controlled by opposition forces, by these extremist groups. And they were on the verge of retaking Duma, Assad's forces. In fact, on Wednesday, before this alleged chemical attack, which took place the next weekend, Jaish al-Islam actually let go of 5 of their political prisoners who they were torturing to the Syrian government. They freed them. And there was some internal disagreements as to how quickly they should give up the fight and flee to the Idlib province. But they were on the verge of losing, and Assad was on the verge of winning. So it would make no sense for Assad to commit a chemical weapons attack when everyone knows, that was the red line in the sand that Obama drew. If there's a chemical weapons attack, then that means that there's going to be U.S. intervention, okay? So why, when he's on the verge of regaining this critical territory, would he knowingly invite U.S. airstrikes to his country? It doesn't add up.
So as you mentioned, Vaush ended up quitting, or rage quitting, the debate. And could you just kind of walk me through what your thoughts were when that happened, when he said that debating you was like debating a neo-Nazi, and then he went silent, but you could still see his stream as he was doing weird hand gestures and whatnot?
It was really interesting because he asked me the question. He said, he said something to the effect of like, so you believe, that this happened, that there was this, alleged chemical attack, whatever, and that these cylinders were manually placed, and that this was all a big, like scheme to basically invite U.S. intervention. And he alleged that I believe some other things. And I was like, well, Vaush, like, let's take it point by point. I'll go through each of those things you just asked me if I believe in, and I'll explain to you whether or not I believe in them. And I was going to go through them like quickly. I was just going to go point by point out of all the things he said. Then when I started going through them point by point, he mutes me and he takes out his headphones and leaves. And I'm like, wait, I was responding to something you said. Let's just go point by point here. If you believe if you believe, and I'm not saying you do, but let's say you believed Ian Henderson's report that
He can't.
What?
Oh, wait. If we're at the point now where you're so obviously aware that you've been blown the fuck out that you will literally not participate in a conversation that we are having.
No. Ian Henderson's report said that
I've already given you more attention than you deserve. I know you were desperate to get my attention. If we're literally at this point now.
Ian Henderson's report said that it was more likely that the crater had been made by an explosion, probably from an artillery round, rocket, or mortar.
Fun, my dude.
That these cylinders
talking to you was identical to talking with the neo-Nazi. There's literally no difference between you people.
That these cylinders were manually placed, and it was likely an artillery round, a rocket, or mortar that caused the explosion. Okay, so if you had an explosion that went off, and you had white helmets who were running around yelling that this was a chemical attack, wouldn't you probably be freaking out? Hello? Oh, he must have. I don't know what happened. Did he mute himself? He's still talking. I think he hang up on me? Does anyone know? He hung up. But yeah, I mean, what was going through my head? I don't know. I guess I was just shocked because There was so much information we unfortunately didn't get to. And as you heard throughout the entire debate, he kept saying, he's like, oh, we're just starting. We're just starting. You know, like, we'll get to that. We're just starting this conversation. And I'm like, bro, like, I thought we were just starting, but now you want to quit? I get we were debating for a while already. I think we were like 2 hours in, but Vaush knew and I knew that we hadn't even scratched the surface of some of the most damning parts of this story. So that's why I stayed on after the fact on my stream and talked about everything. But yeah, I was shocked. I felt vindicated because obviously he didn't feel as though he had the necessary arguments to continue this debate. We're just beginning the conversation, really. And he had already been proven wrong 3 times in big ways. It was him recognizing that he wasn't going to last really any longer, and that's probably why he left at such a, like, it really wasn't like a controversial point of the debate. I thought we were going to continue on, but then he just got up and left. And I think, judging from everyone's opinions, that's kind of an accurate interpretation of what happened. And it gave me reason to feel vindicated after he did that.
So what were some of the subjects that you guys didn't get to?
We didn't get to talk about the white helmets. There was a U.S. intimidation meeting, like these anonymous, U.S. officials. They met with, they were forced to meet, or rather the OPCW investigators were forced to meet with the head honcho. And they were essentially like, they were trying to force them to buy into the U.S. narrative and the OPCW senior, narrative surrounding this cover up. We didn't get to talk about that, which is unfortunate. We didn't get to talk about the allegations of like sarin gas use. We didn't get to talk about, I would say we didn't get to talk about like half of the interesting parts of the chlorine discussion either, and like the chlorinated organic compounds discussion that was found by the toxicologist. We didn't really get to talk about even the other inspector and a lot of his claims. We talked about Inspector Ian Henderson, but we didn't get to talk about the other one, Brendan Whelan. We didn't get to talk about some of the incredible reporting that's been done on this subject by, sources other than the Gray Zone, even though I feel like the Gray Zone has done the best reporting on this. I know Vaush would much rather prefer his mainstream media, comfy circles like the Independent or Intercept or any of those sorts of voices. We didn't get to talk about that. There was a lot. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. We didn't get to talk about the fact that Jaish al-Islam actually was preventing the inspectors from visiting the sites in Duma for like 11 days when they were trying to go in and investigate. And Russia and Syria were very pissed off that they couldn't get those inspectors into the sites. And Jaish al-Islam was actually, when they were trying to go out and clear the areas for the inspectors and make it safe for them, Jaish al-Islam, these sleeper cells of this terroristic group, they were firing upon the Syrian army officials who were trying to clear out the area and make it safe for the inspectors. They were throwing explosives at them. There was so much we didn't get to talk about. We didn't even really get to hammer out the details of like what was censored in the final report and how the fact-finding mission team members were forced out of the investigation team. We didn't get to talk about any of that, or the emails that were sent by the head inspectors, by Brendan Whelan and Ian Henderson. There was so much we didn't get to. We didn't talk about the hospital scene, which is probably amongst main voices and journalists and independent voices that was without a doubt a stage scene by the white helmets. So I wish we could have gotten to those things, but again, he decided to rage quit instead.
So have you had any interaction with Vaush since the debate?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think he retweeted some of my stuff, and yeah, that's been the extent of it. He did post. Oh, you know what did happen? I didn't think he was going to post that debate on his own YouTube channel. He did. And he titled it "Debating the Slipperiest Conspiracy Theorists in the World" or something like that. From what I've seen, that is actually the most disliked Vaush debate that he's ever posted. So I think a lot of people in his audience woke up to the fact that, like, you didn't do so hot here. This was not a good look. And you really showed that you didn't know a lot about this issue. He did respond to, he responded to like Aaron Mate on Twitter. He made like a tattoo joke about Aaron's dad, who's a Holocaust survivor. But that's the extent of like the interaction so far, and that I've had with him after the fact. I think he's been chirping a little bit after the debate. The person who's been chirping at me the most has been Dylan Burns, who coached Vaush. He really wants to debate me, like really badly. He will not get out of my messages and my Twitter mentions. So it's kind of like I think Vaush has given up the fight, and now Dylan wants a piece of the pie.
Well, again, I have to say it was a very impressive performance on your part as somebody who has not debated previously, debating Vaush, who has had all these debates with all these different people. But I kind of look at him a bit as like a Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder, who debates people who don't really know how to debate typically, just like people over the phone or whatever. So when he debated you, who wasn't just talking in terms of feelings, but was stating facts, he didn't know what to do at that point, so just ended up calling you a Nazi.
Yeah, I mean I think that's an accurate interpretation of Vaush's like debate tactics, right? Caitlin Johnston, I think, was the one who correctly pointed out the fact that he's literally like Ben Shapiro of the left, right? So that's kind of what he does, and he has really good debate tactics, but poor arguments, and those were exposed in this debate.
Well, one other thing I did want to ask you about was just the response to the debate. Obviously it was generally favorable on your part. One person who had sort of unexpected criticism was Niko House. I guess he took issue with how you characterize Bashar al-Assad, and said that by admitting that he is a dictator, you were undermining your own arguments. I'm just wondering if you had heard about that and if you had any response to that criticism.
I mean, Niko is an interesting character, and I think his words of criticism for me were they fell short. It's like, obviously I'm not advocating for intervention because I feel like Assad's a brutal dictator, which again, I do feel that way. One could make the argument that me as a Westerner, someone who's never even been to Syria, should just keep my mouth shut about how a leader of a foreign nation, of a sovereign nation, is leading their own country, which, like, that's a reasonable thing that one could say, and maybe I should just let Syrians speak for themselves. But if I'm going to be asked point blank on whether or not I think someone has committed war crimes or atrocities against civilians or journalists or professionals, which Assad has, then I'm not going to shy away from speaking my truth. I do think it's very important to highlight the fact that whenever I talk about that, you have to mention the fact that he has done these things in a larger context of fighting a dirty war that is being propped up by some of the most, villainous state actors and powerful state actors on the planet, right? You look at what the United States, what the UK, what Saudi Arabia are all doing in Syria and have been doing throughout the entirety of this dirty war. You have to look at it in the context of that. There's a reason why Assad feels as though it's necessary to establish a police state and crack down on dissenting voices. Now, do I agree with the way that he's done that? No, I do not. But you also have to recognize that this is all being done in the broader context of him fighting a dirty war and trying to maintain his own country's sovereignty. I mean, the Idlib province, this massive region of Syria and the northeast of Syria, where the U.S. claims to own 1/3 of the country, it's still not under Syrian control. So, look, I flat out condone and will always condemn atrocities that are committed against civilians, journalists, medics, which is what has happened in Syria in the past. And it's mostly happened in the past, but you have to look at it in the broader context of what's going on as well. And I do think it's important to mention that. But also, I think that Niko just kind of doesn't like me. And I think there's reasonable criticisms to be made, but like Niko coming at me is a bit ridiculous. He's made violent threats against me in my Twitter DMs in the past, and he doesn't like me because I called him out for working with neo-Nazis in the past, and I said the thing that a lot of people probably think about Niko. And I had a lot of people who reached out to me and were like, thank you for saying that, because no one on the left should be working with neo-Nazis. And I think that kind of got under his skin. So he's made an effort to come at me whenever he sees an opportunity. That opportunity was initially highlighted, though, by really, really great journalists, Vanessa Beeley and Ava Bartlett, right? They do incredible work on Syria, and they said about Bashar al-Assad, which I think there's a reasonable conversation that could be had around that. But the things Niko said in his video were it was just silly. He again, someone who's clearly uninformed on the issue and was like making these wild accusations that I was advocating for intervention because I had to say that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have nuance when you're talking about these foreign countries, especially, as a Westerner or as an American. And I think that's really where Breadtube, the honest people who kind of fall into the Breadtube trap of listening to people like Vaush, I think it's because they want to like support the Kurds, for example. They want to be, genuine anti-authoritarians or anarchists and criticize these countries. But the trap I think that they fall into is just blindly repeating Western propaganda and, again, playing into these imperialist narratives where you're effectively supporting U.S. intervention in Syria because you don't think that Syrians should have a dictator. But again, Syria should also, like, the CIA is not the revolutionary vanguard that's going to deliver freedom to the Syrian people.
Yeah. It's like they are not Syrians. So for them to say that, like, oh, well, Kurdish rule would be much better for all of you than Bashar al-Assad, the person who was, democratically elected. It's just such an insane statement. And you can go back and watch Vaush's videos and a lot of these Breadtubers videos. They'll openly say that the U.S. should be in Syria supporting a free Kurdistan or Rojava or any of these projects, right? But it's like if a state can't survive based on its own merits and its own strength and its own cultural background, then maybe it shouldn't be a state. If it can't survive without U.S. imperialism and U.S. intervention, then maybe it just shouldn't be its own state. And that's what you have to come to terms with. Like, regardless of whether you think it's a good idea or not a good idea, all that we know is that Syrians know what the best idea for them is, and they know how they want to be led, and they know how they want to be their country developed further down the line. And in no way, shape, or form do I think that has ever, do I think that they have ever wanted like U.S. intervention in their own country? So for Vaush to say that's what Syrians want and that's what they should have, it's ridiculous.
Well, Jackson, I really do appreciate you coming on the show and going over this debate and, talking about these broader themes. Again, I personally think it's going to become, more prevalent in the coming months and years, especially with Democrats at the helm of the war machine. I think that you're going to see people like TYT and Vaush and Breadtube supporting Empire, while folks at the Gray Zone and Jimmy Dore and you and I and Lee Camp and Abby Martin, are taking solid stances against Empire. So it's going to be interesting to watch that play out over the next couple of years. But thanks again for coming on the show to discuss this today. For folks out there who would like to support you and follow you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. I'm on Twitch, Rockfin, Odyssey as well. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Jackson Hinkle with 2 L's. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love your show and I watched all the episodes, and I really enjoyed the episode with Rania. So, and Jimmy, the last one you did with Jimmy. So keep it up. And you're an incredible voice for the anti-imperialist left. And we got to continue to build these collaborations and building our influence. So thank you for everything you do, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully I can have you back at some point in the future.